hear you.
Just can somebody check on the YouTube?
Shalini's mic is not working. If you can check, Dinesh.
No, the mic is on, but her network connection is very weak, so it's not able to transmit the signals.
In case there's a problem, Professor Nile, you can start straight away if Shalini is not able to.
We'll just see. I think she's trying.
Yeah.
Sagar or Fakhruddin, can you please check on the YouTube whether you got a feed or not?
Yeah, right now it's loading.
Yeah. It has started. Somebody is telling me.
Okay, done.
It's on.
Okay.
It's on.
Started.
Yeah, good. So I think worked very well.
Sagar, are you able to see it live on YouTube?
Yes.
We checked.
Okay.
So.
Shalini, are you able?
Shalini ma'am's connection, I think, is
Professor Nile, why don't you start?
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening to all of you. Welcome to Navrachna University. Today we have a very interesting session, the journey of an architect. And the speaker is Professor Pratyush Shankar. Professor Pratyush has joined us recently as the Dean of the School of Environment, Design and Architecture. So it'll be very interesting to listen to his story because he has over a couple of decades of teaching at SET University. So he also teaches at a university in Germany called Darmstadt and is a Humboldt Fellow. So he has visited several countries as a part of the Humboldt Fellowship. And one of his books on Himalayan cities is an outcome of the Humboldt Fellowship and his visit to various cities in the Himalayan region. Navrachna University believes in a very interdisciplinary approach towards education. We are very innovative in everything we do, interdisciplinary, and we also do everything with a social conscience and a social objective. So if you join Navrachna University as a student, you will learn not only the field of your specialization, which I would imagine architecture or design, but you can also learn whatever you like to learn because we have schools of management, law, engineering, science, of course, architecture and design, education, social work, journalism. So the whole spread is so wide. And it all depends on your motivation. It all depends on your passion to learn. And that is what the university gives you. So today we will understand, and as I myself, I'm not an architect, but as I've been attending more and more of the sessions of Professor Pratyush and his team in the School of Environment, Design and Architecture, what I found is that this field of design and architecture is such a fascinating interdisciplinary profession. It really opens your mind and opens your perspective by integrating so many things: arts, science, literature, engineering. Everything can be combined. Is the outcome? The outcome is in architecture and design. So welcome once again, all of you, and we all look forward to hearing Professor Pratyush Shankar. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nile. Thank you for this very kind introduction, and thank you for all the encouragement that you have been giving to not only me, but to the university as a whole. And I think I really like your ideas on interdisciplinary and how we need to look at disciplines around us. And hopefully, I think in some of the things that you will see today, my research interest and my teaching interest and practice interest, you might find some resonance here. And first, I must thank Navrachna University and the Board of Management and Provost and our Registrar for inviting me at Navrachna University to head the School of Environmental Design and Architecture. I'm very excited about the possibilities, and I'm really enjoying myself here. So thanks for that. And without wasting any more time, I would straight away jump into my presentation. I have titled it An Architect's Journey. I'm trying to share with you some last 20 years of my work. This is 20 years of both practice and research. And I think it is very important for us to understand this whole world of practice and research and how they are not exclusive worlds, but they are absolutely interrelated. Because end of the day, what we have to ask ourselves is what is it that we want to do? Be it what are the kind of questions that we are asking? We are asking the same questions in teaching, in research, and practice. And hopefully, you will begin towards the end of the presentation, begin to see the parallels between the two. My presentation today is targeted at not only students, but also young professionals and also my colleague. In some sense, it's a retrospective and a cross section of selected projects that I have picked up to give you a perspective on how I look at architecture, what are my views on design and architecture. So without wasting any more time, I will straight away jump into the presentation. Somebody just give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen.
Yeah, we can see.
Great. This is what I'm talking about. It's an architect's journey, practice and research. And first I would like to show some projects of mine. That's what we're calling as a practice. And after that, I will get into the questions of research. I am taking you landscape wise, which means that I will first talk about projects that I've done in particular kind of region. In this case, it is the Aravalis, mainly in the region of Udaipur, where I started my practice. And that's a very interesting story how I started my practice. And there was this one parcel of land. So Udaipur and Aravalis are dry, scrubby, but they get very green during the monsoon. More gentle slopes that are there. And there's this parcel of land where in one area, in one kind of a precinct, I've done 3 projects. And the 4th project is about to come. The first project was a studio for artists that I did. This was in 1999 after 4-5 years of graduation. And there's a very interesting studio for actually my father-in-law. But when I did this project, he was not my father-in-law. And we were just seeing each other. So this was like a test project. He was trying to test me out, whether I'm capable or not and stuff like that. So this is what I kind of always give to my students is one must fall in love, that one must always do, but also we need to check out the father-in-law and mother-in-laws if they can give you some project.
Yeah. Excuse me, Professor Pratyush, just a second, if you don't mind. Dinesh, can you mute everyone, please?
So right now all are on mute except your and Pratyush's microphone.
Thank you. Yeah, please continue.
So the first project, and then I go on to design a house for them that was close by after a few years. That is again for this 3 generation of artists. Then more artists started coming in that area, and then I make another studio and a weekend house in the same region. And then the last project is a art center where these artists have got together and created a trust or an organization where they want to promote art. And I'll talk about these last 3 projects and the whole experience of these last 3 projects. And I have a whole attitude. What I'm trying to talk about is I'm talking about, and the fact that I'm calling it about the fact that this is in the Aravalis, that means there is something unique about the landscape. A lot of my projects are in some sense a response to landscape. So I will begin my presentation by talking about this particular project, which is shown by a red arrow, which is a long, thin house that I have done. Yeah, it is a long, thin house. And conceptually speaking, this project has been conceived as a dam. A dam is something that goes against, it stops the flow of water. In this case, we are allowing the flow. But dams are very curious structures because on one side, there is a barren wall. But on the other side, the whole landscape is revealed to you. In this case, in the case of a dam, water is revealed from the other side. And I was pretty much fascinated by this whole idea of kind of denying the landscape and revealing it. Because I feel that if you really have to appreciate landscape, then you first have to, create a kind of a barrier and then reveal the landscape. And that is why we designed this house that is built on this Barsati Nala. So there is this Nala that flows right from the center of the plot. And we built a house right across it like a dam, allowing the water to flow in. It is a very thin, long structure. And since on the sides it is built against the slope, the first floor almost touches the ground. Once I show you photographs, you will understand better. So it looks very barren and kind of very mysterious from one side, but on the other side, it opens up to nature. So in some sense here, I was trying to, explore this relationship between nature and the human construct. And I'm trying to kind of create a kind of a dialogue. It is so low since you're building it just on the bed, you really don't see it. This is while it was being constructed. This is how it looks when you approach the project. You don't know what is on the other side. So you're actually drawn in. When you don't know what is on the other side, you're very curious. So it has less opening. We have used local materials. It's a kind of a barren wall that you begin to see on the outside, enticing, interesting, but still it doesn't say what it is. And as you go in, all of a sudden the landscape opens up. So there are lot of openings on the other side. So you kind of deny a relationship with landscape on one side, on the other side you open it up. It's a lot more transparent, a lot more playful, a lot of water and a lot of reflective material has been used on the other side. And this is how it kind of opens up. So this is, in some sense, in this particular project, what I'm trying to do here is, this is the central part of the project. So you enter from the left-hand side, on the right side, there are a lot of openings. So what I'm trying to do here is block the view, block people, allow them to enter, and then all of a sudden there is a kind of a revelation. This is what happens during the monsoon. So we made a little check dam, so water passes right through the center of the project. It passes kind of right from the center of the project. We've also built a little mezzanine as a little artist studio. So if you notice, you're on the first floor, and if you keep going on the first floor towards the end, you can see the ground, because the first floor hits the ground, because purposely the project has been built against the slope. This is one of the artists who is no more, P.N. Choyal. He was the main artist whose family then subsequently pursued art. One of the studios there. So this particular house has studios, 3 studios and living spaces. And this is how it kind of lights up during the evening. And that's the horizon I was talking about that you see on the other side. The second project I got again, so another artist came in the same area, bought a piece of land, and he wanted to build, his name is Abbas Patliwala. He wanted to build a studio. And in this case, this is where it comes between an existing studio and the house. There was a different problem that I was facing. One was land was sloping, and it was only sloping on one side. And this time around, I set up a different problem for myself, apart from the fact that, of course, it must have all the functions and activities. I was seeing if 2 different attitudes to landscapes are possible. So can we kind of make one side of the project have a very experiential bodily idea of landscape, where you yourself go up and down and engage with the landscape? And can we literally glide over the landscape on the other side, almost like a binary opposite? It is in some sense continuation of the last idea, but can we do that in the same slope? So that's what I was trying to do. And these are the kind of drawings that we made. Sometimes we make these drawings after the project. So this is the entrance on this side, if you can see the cursor, and this is the main building. And then you have this large wooden deck that comes out that doesn't touch the landscape at all. So on one side, you're terribly engaged with the landscape at every nook and corner, almost like the Havelis of Udaipur. And on the other side, you are almost like on a deck on a beach, where the landscape just goes past by. So it creates a very different sensorial experience. These are the kind of visualizations that we have done for the project. So to really understand, we do a lot of drawing where we try to locate how a building is going to look like. A lot of these drawings sometimes are done after the project. These are the models that were built. And finally, this is how the project came about. Local material, they've used local stone. This is the side where you enter. As I said, very constrained, very small, very intimate kind of a scale, nothing grand about it. That's how you enter. And this is how the project kind of opens up on the other side. So you get this kind of a deck where you can sit. This is around the time of construction, so the landscape has not taken over, but this is how the landscape is now kind of taken over. I also use two different materials. This is the inside. I use wood and I use stone in this material, also showing two contrasting qualities. So we have two contrasting engagements with the land, but also kind of two contrasting qualities of material here. So this is the steps going to the basement. The windows, as you would notice, are a little tribute to Corbusier here. And this is how the project has kind of come out. And the third project that is coming here is an art center, which would come here roughly, hopefully by next year. And again, there has been a conscious effort. So an art center is a very different ballgame altogether. It is a place for the community now, and it is no more a private space. And yet they are going to be resident artists who are going to be working there and living there. So as an analogy, what I've used is I've made these cave kind of structures where I'm imagining the artist to be working. Almost like monks who reside in caves, they have to be reclusive, they need silence. So I'm using the land and I'm digging up the land to create these semi-basement kind of structures which will work as studios. And the top, if you notice, is totally open like a pavilion. So this is the top part, which is open, which is where artists meet, which is where exhibitions happen. And this is the bottom part where they are the artist studios, almost kind of, in their own little den, apart from the living quarters on the right-hand side. So I've used the analogy of the Buddhist monastery here. And this is how it should be looking when it is built. So again, there is some kind of an engagement with the landscape. We have gone against the slope to create a court-like structure, use the level of the land to create this kind of artist studio below. And on the top is almost like a pavilion kind of a structure with a library, with steps coming down. So it really feels and begins to feel like a community space. So these were the models that we had made for that particular project. I will now come to another landscape. And this is, I think it would be very interesting for students to notice how our design changes. Something continues, but something, changes when we reach another landscape. And I'm looking at Himalayas. And Himalayas is a very unforgiving landscape. It is very harsh, immense amount of rainfall, and it can snow, but it can also get extremely cold. And you need a whole different strategies of dealing with land. Aravallis can be more gentle slope, but Himalayas can be very, very unforgiving. So when we had this project to design cottages in Pokhara, very, very harsh slopes. And the first strategy we had is where do you cut things from and where do you fill? So the aim is to create these flat podium structures without bringing too much material from the outside, so that you get some flat ground. You cut and you start creating retaining walls, and you start using light material, which do not have too much of a load, a good substitute to wood or wood kind of a structure or steel structures. And that is how we were kind of creating ideas of the cottage. So, you're moving along the slopes, but then there are some parts of the cottages that jut out to the main view that is outside. But a lot of the strategy here has been dealing with the land. This is a project that is still going on. And again, we make many models. And, when in my lectures, I keep telling students, keep making models, keep making models. This is what I mean. And this is just hardly any 10-20% of the models that we make for one small projects. This is in our studio. For another project, now it's not always land or landscape that kind of, influences us. Sometimes we are also influenced by history, by our heritage, and by some vernacular typology. And in this case, I was very much fascinated by the vernacular typology of thin, long kind of houses or structures with a sloping roof. And I found it to be extremely practical. And that is what I used to kind of build a house for Andy, client and now a good friend of mine, Anand Gurum, a thin, long house with a sloping roof so that a lot of light can come in. And I was very conscious that since this is in Kathmandu, very long winters, I've lived there, sometimes no electricity. We wanted to use as much as possible the heat of the sun. So I gave this skylight in the veranda. so that in the summer when the heat, when the light falls in it, the light falls in the on the veranda. But in the winters, when the sun angle goes, more south, it tilts. Then the light actually enters the inside, and this is how the structure has come out. I kind of look at history, I look at things of heritage value, but I don't like mimicking history because I think that time has gone. But I do get inspired and encouraged by the past, and I like to reinterpret. So this is also a reinterpretation of a vernacular house using modern materials and modern sensibility. So that is what this house has kind of shaped like. So this was something on the Himalayas, and increasingly, if we kind of look at our landscape today, I mean, it's not always that we have exotic clients or maybe exotic landscape to work with. A lot of people think that we are always working in beautiful areas like Udaipur, Jaipur, and Kathmandu and Pokhara. Well, we always also get very normal kind of a projects. And in urban areas, I think the challenge really is whenever you have an opportunity, you have to grab it and really convert it into something else. You have to almost create like a fictitious imagination where none exists. And this is one such story that I've designed this strip garden, and this is did it way back, I think, in the year 2000 or 2001, and somehow I never kind of, have not exhibited this particular project. But this is in Ahmedabad, it is in Sardar Bagh. And this was a very interesting project because it is a very long strip of land, almost 130-meter long, but uh, very, very, very narrow, almost 9 meter. And what happened in this particular project is that, there was a new traffic police commissioner, Samiullah Ansari, and he was handling the traffic park that is on the right of it. And there was this strip of land that was lying waste, and they didn't know what to do with it. People were just dumping, waste there. And he asked us, "Can you propose something? Can you come up with an idea? Otherwise, I'm going to cement it and pave it." So we said, "Don't do that. We can, come up with something really interesting for this parcel of land." And in 48 hours, we made these drawings. We mapped the whole place, and we said that it is possible to grow some plants. It is possible to pave this area. And this was absolutely barren. It was a dump yard, and we can convert it into a strip garden. It is almost like using this urban opportunity or opportunity to do something where this is a parcel of land that was lying waste. You have the Apna Bazaar building on the right hand side. And from the window of Apna Bazaar building, people would just throw waste. But the moment they notice that this garden is done, they stop throwing the waste. So this is how we developed. We made the drawings in 48 hours, in 2 days. And on the third day, this project had actually started. And we did most of the project on the site by any kind of material that was around us, simple bricks, pota stone, gravels, and whatever plant material we could get our hand to. But it was also very satisfying. So you have on the bottom, if you see, is the children traffic park, a project that Doshi had designed way back in 1974. Then I was asked to renovate the children traffic park. And because of that, the traffic park also became very lively. So the parents could stand here and watch their kids go around. And this is a traffic park where kids are taught about traffic sensibility. Yeah, I think it is something that is very much needed in a place like Ahmedabad, more than anything anywhere else. And so this was, one such project that I did, very urban project. Now this is a project that is very close to my heart. This is a gym that we have done, and we have designed this gym. This is the model of that gym in Kathmandu. When we were doing this gymnasium, so there were this group of cross fitness trainers and students, and they were interested in fitness and health. And we said one thing, that why should gym be closed spaces? Why can't gym be something that is closer to nature? Gymming as an activity or sports as an activity is so wonderful, but I hate going to a gym because you're put in that air conditioned chamber, and there is smell and sound and sweat everywhere. So we said, why not in the true Greek tradition, if I may, a gym can be something that can be one with nature, and can a gym be a place where the community that is into fitness love going there, they love interacting there. And that is where we came up with this whole idea of a pavilion, a structure that is so light that it brings nature in. So while you are exercising, you always feel nature around you. But to do that, we had to make sure that we get our uh, not only the aesthetics right, but we get our tectonics right. We really understand the materiality. So this was a very tight urban plot. Again, increasingly we are and we will get more urban projects, and in these little pockets, can we create a little beautiful island? And that's what we are trying to do. So this is the visualization that we showed to our clients, that you can have a gym that can be so transparent and yet safe. It can protect you from the elements of nature. But how about a gym where you feel you're actually in the jungle? And that is how we started developing the sections of the gym. This is what we came up with it in terms of the plan. So it's a very light plan. It has to be very delicate. The structure had to be just right. And we did a lot of research on getting the tectonics right. So these were the series of models that we were making almost in 1:10 scale. We were putting these models in areas around our studios and checking it out. We were taking photographs, constantly, engaging with this whole thing of going back and forth and trying to get our design right. So we were really at it in this project. This project was happening in Kathmandu, and we were making our models here in Baroda. This is almost like a 1:10 replica that we had made out here in Baroda while we were, doing this project. And, this is a little joke that went around. Once there was a problem on the site, something happened and they could not execute the details. So we had this very interesting story inspired from Apollo 13, Houston, we have a problem. So what happens in these space programs is they have a replica of the space module that is there in Houston. And they try to replicate the problem on the ground, the problem that that astronaut might be facing, on in the space. And so, we quickly got our model out. And these are our team. We had this little joke going around: who is the flight director and the mission director? And I mean, these people, these are my colleagues in my office who are actually having fun. And they were checking out, trying out this model, what works, what doesn't work. And this is the fun part, So when there's a lot of humor when we are working, a lot of problems come up, but then I think we take it as a challenge, and that is also hallmark of our practice, and that is what kind of defines us. So we have been lately been making a lot of models, and this is how it has actually turned out. These are pictures just from a few weeks back, because as soon as it was inaugurated, there was a lockdown, and it's wonderful to see these people, essentially a community of gymmers in this space. So I always, whenever I get a call from them, I say, I'm so jealous of the level of your fitness, and also jealous of the kind of space that you have for practice and for training. So it feels good, you feel connected with nature, you feel inspired. This is Tony, one of the main trainers there. They gave us very, very, very strong inputs. Now, whereas I'm talking about landscape in this particular presentation, there's a host of technical requirements that we were trying to satisfy. We had to understand each and every equipment that they are using. We had to understand the heights that they need. We had to understand the ventilation, the light condition. We got into many, many technicalities. In fact, some of the staff in our office even started going to gym, to get into the project. It is like one of those actors who get into the groove. They kind of start living the character. So it's very satisfying to see the project, and that's what I keep telling my staff. The hard work we did in making that model, getting it right, shows when the final product comes up. So that's a gym. This is one of our first projects in Baroda. We also, so it's not like we're only doing houses or buildings. Uh, we pick up projects that are fascinating, that we pick up projects that are innovative. So when the clients of Soul Brew, one of the chains in Baroda, came up to us and they said that we need a coffee shop uh, at the Alembic compound. And then we asked ourselves, what is it about a coffee shop that's most fascinating? And one thing that really struck us that, interiors can be terribly boring these days, because interiors, unfortunately, in not all, but many of the cases, have just become random play of geometry and random play of shapes without any purpose. And we said our interiors must have a purpose. And this coffee shop is a place where people go who like coffee, who like to see a coffee machine, who like to see a mixer, who like to see a grinder. It is great to look at beans, great to look at a cup. And we thought to ourselves, can this whole idea of coffee machine be actually be defined by objects? So the whole space has to be about this platform, which is beautiful, where you walk along the platform while you order your coffee, and you see various things. And we said to ourselves, we don't need to do too much, we need to get this platform right. It should be a warm, simple wooden platform with the coffee machine, with the cups, with the mixer, grinder, all the things, and the fascinating world of coffee is revealed to you. And that's how we planned. This was the elevation that we had made, and this is how it turned out. This is the Soul Brew. You guys can take a visit to that place. They have good coffee, Soul Brew coffee at Alembic. And as per our plan, we had designed blackboards and objects, and the client somehow never got to finish the project. He never put all the blackboards because they had to start soon, and they started doing boring business, and somehow the blackboards were not there. So these blackboards are Photoshopped. They are not there actually. And my staff has done a wonderful job to Photoshop the blackboards and everything that we wanted to actually see in the coffee shop. So if you happen to visit this coffee shop, imagine these blackboards to be there and these objects to be there, because that is what gives it a character. So one of the tricks in this particular project is how not to do too much, and just to do little, but just to do it absolutely right. And I think that is one of the biggest lessons in architecture, that we tend to overdo everything. We tend to go overboard. We then tend to start kind of doing too much. So that was the kind of a challenge that we have. Whereas when we are working in plains, flat plains present a very, very different challenge. Uh, when we're working in the Himalayas or the Aravalis, the landscape is very strong. But when we have the plain, there is no reference. What are we responding to? Somebody might say plains are very boring. But then what we did while we were doing one of the competition entries is to look at the characteristic that is possible while working with plains. So for example, flat landscape and trees and foliage and what we can do around it. So this is before I, three more projects before I jump into my own studio. This is a competition that we did. It was known as the Bharat Bhavan competition. It's a hypothetical project. Bharat Bhavan is a cultural center. And we proposed this cultural center. We could choose our site in Baroda. So a flat plain kind of a site, but a site that was very interesting and very close to my heart is that whole area of Kamati Bagh. And when we were doing this project, so this is a cultural center, government funded. And, if you look at the history of cultural center, and I'm talking about Bharat Bhavan and Jawahar Kala Kendra of the 70s and 80s, they were seen as these institutions that have their own parcel of land, that have their own compound wall, and they don't seem to be talking to anyone else. Now, while I was proposing this competition entry, and this is was an award winning, we got the first prize for this. What I said to the team and all of us discussed is that we don't want to do a standalone project. We want to do a project that talks to other institutions, much in line with what Professor Nilay Yachnik was saying when he introduced today's session about multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary. Supposing, imagine a cultural center that is connected to the garden, connected to the university, connected to the museum, connected to the zoo, and they all kind of work together. And we came up with almost like a utopian plan. Supposing you were to wake up in the morning and you find that these almost spaceships are hovering over you. Imagine going to Kamati Bagh in the morning and the whole Kamati Bagh has been taken over by these spaceships that are hovering over you. So we wanted a project. These are actually cultural pods that are in the air, that are suspended in the air by columns, and they kind of connect to different parts. Let me just explain it. So here is the Baroda Museum here, and there you have a plaza. Then there is this pod which is up in the sky. Then there is another cultural pod, another plaza. There is an underbridge that connects to another pod. None of them are in the ground, they're all in the air, but they're all connected with each other, and they are connected with the museum, with the garden, with the fine arts, with the design institute, almost like a utopian dream. And sometimes it is important to be utopian, not that these projects have to be realized, but because of the kind of questions that these projects can raise. So these are those pods that are kind of hovering in the sky, as you notice, and there are these red color steel bridges that almost suck in people above, where they can have these various cultural things. So this is the kind of visualization that we create. So sometimes fiction can be very useful for artists, for architects, because we are able to kind of, I'm in some sense questioning the very idea of standalone institutes. Institutes must be transparent, they must allow people to come in, and they must talk to other institutes. That is the kind of argument that we were giving. So these are those spots up in the sky, and the trees that are going in. So this was some of the models that we made for this particular project. And now I come to my own project, my own studio. And here I will connect with the question of planes that I was talking about. So this is in Chapat, which is just on the outskirts of Baroda. Again, this is on a flat plain. And when we had this plot of land, we were really wondering what we should be responding to, how we should be responding to this kind of a particular landscape. And we came up with this idea that what if we raise the ground and were to create this raised fort? Because the moment you are above the ground, then all of a sudden your relationship with the horizon changes. If you are on the ground, you don't sense the horizon, but you go up, all of a sudden the horizon opens up to you. And that was one. So we were trying to respond to the horizon. And second, if you notice in this project, it has a very light roof. And again, I was trying to use an idea of a pavilion. And the reason, I guess, I was trying to use an idea of a pavilion, so that's how the structure is a raised garden behind and a very simple pavilion structure. And the reason for the structure of pavilion was so that it can be one large space where everyone can work together. We did not want an office with divisions. We want it, and I would like that the office is like a community of architects more than anything else. So that is the visualization. So all the clutter has been taken below, and the office space has been kept above with a raised garden. So this is the plan. It looks like a very, very simple plan, but inside it is terribly complicated. Professor V.R. Shah, by the way, was a structural engineer in this particular project, and it was actually wonderful to work with him. He just gave a lecture a few weeks back. And this is the lower area, this is the upper area, and this is how it looks like. We have used black trap stone, the same stone, what is known as a kapchi stone, that is used in slabs. And for a very long time, if it is Baroda, it has to be red bricks. In some sense, we were also trying to question this, kind of a very cliched view. If you're doing something interesting in Baroda, it better be bricks. Well, you get excellent stone just from 20 kilometers away. And we were also checking out the possibilities of having this kind of a stone structure below and a light roof on top. That's the raised garden behind. That's how it looks on the inside. This is a flitched beam. It has 8 mm plate in the center with teak wood on both sides. That's the studio with blue flooring. It's very simple cement floor that is done in the villages. So that's the structure. It's kind of like a pavilion structure, very lightweight, very simple furniture. And it was very important for me to have a structure which makes people who are working there very, very happy. That's something kind of very important. And they feel good about being there. So one is, it is cut off from the city. And I do not spend as much time there these days, but the people who are working there spend a lot of time. And the best part is we also have a pizzeria there. that's something very interesting about this place, that we have managed to make uh, put a pizzeria, and we are also making some very interesting pizzas. Some of the photographs will come very soon. So many times we have these pizza parties. We did a lot of research on what should be a good pizzeria, and we realized that a good pizzeria, in a good pizzeria, you should be able to make uh, pizzas in 180 seconds to 200 seconds max. So we got our maths, we got our physics book out, and we designed this little pizzeria. And, then it is covered by stone, so we've used fire bricks. So we have a lot of these pizza parties there, and we have become expert. This is the best pizzas in town, by the way. This is my staff, grinning their way to glory. They are experts in making pizzas. They also make very good models, by the way. And not only pizzas, we are not some kind of Western pizza snobs. We have also tried making undia. We tried it twice. Once we succeeded, once we did not. So we are also now moving on to other more contextual and vernacular kind of dishes. So that's my kind of studio team. We had a reunion when a lot of these people had come. I spend a lot of time in Navratna University these days, and the folks who work in my studio, these are the kind of things that they keep doing. They made this little GIF on their own, and they posted it on the group, and that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted a studio to be a place where they have fun, where they feel free, and in the process, by the way, it's a very demanding work also. It's a lot of demanding work. For this presentation, my office was working till 4 o'clock in the night, till 4 o'clock in the night yesterday. And then we kind of, we want to be creative and innovative. When the lockdown happened, then we were wondering what to do. We are not 20 of us, we are just 5 of us, but these are different composition of different Zoom calls we were doing. And like we were doing in Navratna University, we were having a design competition. We also said that imagine a city, this was a challenge thrown to all 5 of them. Imagine a city after pandemic, what would happen? And they came up with some very wild imagination, some kind of so here there is this whole city, you have to wear a gas mask to go out in the city. The green takes over. That's what Kruti did, where nature has totally engulfed the city. And in one particular place, the city has totally gone below the ground. So we keep doing these creative kind of exercises, in our studio. And the studio really is about, if you ask me, about the community of these folks who work with me. And I think that was something very important, that we form a fraternity that believes in something, believes in quality work, asks the right question. So that's how I practice. These were some of the projects from my practice, and as you can notice, I don't know, maybe someone else can articulate it better. I do get influenced a lot from landscape and from context, and a lot of my work is a response to the landscape. But then it is not a universal response. It kind of changes with the changing condition. So this is what I try to highlight. Now I will take 20 more minutes to talk about my research. And I not only I'm a professor, primarily an academic. And I feel that because I'm an academic, I practice like this. And because I practice like this, I become an academic like this. So, all my clients know I'm also a professor. So the kind of projects that we also get are those where, they are looking for that kind of an innovative kind of an approach. But I see a huge relationship between how I teach and how I practice. And I always like to show these projects and the process of design to my students so they understand. So it's not like they are not two different worlds for me. All the kind of things that I talk to my students, I actually like to do it in my own studio. That's my belief, that's my ideology. Uh, and I will now move on to some of my research projects. So for some of you who do not know, I wrote a book titled Himalayan Cities, which was published in 2015 by Niyogi Publisher. And I would tell you a little story about how this whole thing about Himalayan cities happened. And Himalayan Cities is a book that tries to look at the urban structures in all across Himalayas and tries to make a case where I'm trying to correlate urban form of Himalayas with the landscape. Yeah. But then this whole thing about writing a book, people ask me, how do you start writing a book? And well, my story is that it is not something you plan for, but something that eventually happens, and there has to be a build-up towards writing a book. For me, my interest in Himalaya started like any one of you. I started trekking there. I started trekking as a student, and then I formed a trekking club with my students. This is me and Pragya when we were students in MS University. Uh, Shalini was my classmate. Pragya was a few years. She came after a few years, and this is our time in I think 90, 94, 95. This is what we did. This is what all of you might also be doing. And then I started taking my students to the Himalayas, and that was nice. I felt very good that I could expose them to the Himalayas, but still the connection with the Himalayas was almost like a traveler. After a while, I started doing much more serious documentation trip. Again, it was part of an academic interest, taking my students there. And I used to love, I still love going out traveling with students. It is a great, fraternity and bonds that you form with the student community. This is with my very good friend and a very important inspiration for me, Professor Mickey Desai. He really taught me a lot about documentation and used to travel together with our students. And then I got a fellowship in Nepal. And then at that time, my son was just, that's my son there who is sleeping, was just 2 months old. And we moved to Nepal. The whole family moved to Nepal. This was in 2008. And this was almost for a year we were living. And it was one of the most amazing times of our lives. And this is, I'm also kind of giving you some sense of my personal life because I think you cannot separate the personal and the professional. So the whole family moved there, and we were very adventurous, and our kids also joined in. And that's when I started putting my work together for the book on Himalayas. Before I jump into some of the key findings of the book, I won't take too much time on this. Just a little note on this whole business about drawings. We all know these kind of drawings. These are the kind of drawings that you all do in related study programs, which are very, very detailed drawings. Now, when we do this drawing, we have a huge team of students who are there that are doing this drawing. But when I was in the Himalayas, I was alone. I mean, I only had my two kids. One was 4 years and the second was 2 months, and surely they could not have been of any help. So I devised a technique, which is a fairly old technique of making freehand yet proportionate drawing. And I found it to be very liberating to be able to draw freehand. These were the kind of drawings that I was doing. And also, it was quick, it was fast, and I was able to explore a level of complexity through freehand drawing, which otherwise becomes very, very cumbersome if I'm using CAD or any such softwares. So I believe a lot of in drawing with my own hands. For this, for example, this particular tower, it's a 9-story tower, and it's a 700-year-old building. This is a tower in Chenikoti, or a house in Patan. So these are all freehand drawing, and with freehand drawing, I felt that I'm able to express the character, and I've used these drawings as persuasive tools to make an argument also. So this is just a bit of a note on how I like to draw. I will just take a few minutes to talk about this particular book because a lot of people felt that it would be nice to hear it from me also. So one of the first argument that comes out in the book is about how landscape influences cities. So this is the big argument that I'm giving, and I begin with the idea of landscape, that when you have these isolated settlements in a valley, then the surplus is also limited. And what you also find in the Himalayas is this is a place of small kingdoms, almost like the Greek city-state. So it is a different kind of politics. If plains are associated with large kingdoms, colonizations, and large empires, hills or Himalayas are associated with small kingdoms. So we had a phenomena of city-states. Small city-state has been historically the hallmark of the Himalayas. What we also observe in this historical city-states is a very strong idea of city center. And this city center, that's what I'm arguing, is a very secular city center with a lot of publicness. Unlike many other places in the Indian subcontinent where open spaces are usually community spaces, they were truly public. And that's the kind of mapping I started doing. They were usually in front of the palace as a big ground that was there. and they still happen to be very thriving, open, public places of the city. This is in Kathmandu Valley, what we call as a Darbar Square. And there is this huge relationship between the city center and public life. It has afforded a kind of a public life. It has afforded kind of democratic practices. Even the temples that are there actually work as extremely secular structures. They really don't work as, just religious structures alone, because as an urban device feature, they're actually activating the space. So these are some wonderful drawing that my colleague who was up till night, up till 4 o'clock in the night, Kruti Patel has made. She's just finished, and now she's going to Polytechnic Milan. And these city centers are the ones that have historically afforded a lot of life. And because of that, they have afforded or encouraged a kind of a public culture, a performance culture, and has led to uh, the whole idea of publicness and performance and publicness take very strong root even in the contemporary society. This is just, I'm giving you a glimpse of the book. So one of my focus is to look at questions of space, questions of performance, and the kind of public life it has. This is another kind of a performance that take place of a rath that is pulled, and while it is pulled, it happens to stitch the countryside, with the city. So these are kind of stuff that I was doing while I was, in Nepal, and I wrote the book. The new book that I'm writing, and this is really the last part of my presentation. I will just take around 10 more minutes. The new book that I'm writing is known as The History of Urban Form. Now, this is really coming as a professor of history, or rather, I teach urban history. And I taught urban history for practically 15 years at SEPT. And one of the things that I noticed is there are hardly any books on India. There are very few books on India. And we are always using Western theory and Western construct to make sense of Indian cities. So this was one way in which I started putting together data on Indian cities to make sense of it. To my mind, the question is not of information anymore. In this digital age, we have enough information. I also feel we are doing enough documentation, but there are very few people who are offering frameworks or concepts or connecting the dots. And that's what I'm trying to do here. Uh, we did many cities. So there's a lot of field work that we have done, more than 40, 45 cities of India that has been covered in the book. But what is most interesting is, and Professor Nilay Yajnik was talking about Humboldt Fellowship. In fact, just next week we are having a webinar by the Humboldt ambassador to India about fellowship opportunities for Navrachna University. But this is the whole thing. This book was made possible by generous funding from Humboldt Foundation, and the fact that I could spend time in Germany just doing that research and nothing else. And that was something very, very important. And as part of the book, and this is something I'm very excited about, we developed a very interesting drawing technique. The drawing of the city has to be very persuasive. So these are drawings that have been done by my colleague Snigdha Srivastav. She worked with me. In fact, she was responsible for building the whole studio. Then she went to pursue her conservation, and she's back now. And these are some amazing visualization of Deccan cities. And the moment you look at these drawings, you know what the argument is about the role of these two big institutions. In this case, it is the masjid and the madrasa, and the rest of the city is organic. Or in this particular drawing, where there are the royal necropolis outside the city. And in this particular section, I make a case of how the suburbs begin to be more public than the city center. And this drawing technique was kind of very, very useful for this beautiful drawing of Srirangam that Kruti has made of the temple cities. And I'll talk a bit more about the temple cities in a few minutes. This is one of my favorite drawing. This is Snigdha was making this drawing for almost 4 months. And there is no reference to the drawing. This is about the tent cities during the Mughal period. It seems that almost, I think around 70% of the time, around 70% of the time of a Mughal ruler was spent on the move. The Mughal rulers were always on the move. And when they moved, the whole city moved with them. This was almost a city of almost 50,000 population. So wherever they went, they established their city. And Snigdha would read up, very interesting accounts of European travelers. and she did a conjectural reconstruction of what the tent city would have been like. And it was wonderful to listen to what she has been reading, all translated text of Spanish, Portuguese, and French travelers. And then she has made a map of the whole city. Or this is again a very abstract drawing of Ahmedabad, showing the organic pattern of Ahmedabad, or very abstract drawing of Patan, showing the market streets, and this almost feels like a biological diagram, and that's the argument that I'm presenting when I'm looking at cities of Gujarat. I will come to this last section because I'm kind of nearly finishing my time. I don't want to bore you too much. This is the last section. I'll just pick up one section from the book and explain how I kind of make my arguments. And I'm interested here in looking at the temple towns. You all must be knowing about the temple towns of South India. And here I'm trying to look at the relationship of temple towns with irrigation and with the landscape all around. And I feel that you cannot look at the city in isolation. You have to correlate the city with what is outside. So when we look at a temple town, this is the image that we get. We have a temple in the center and a pretty strong grid of the city all around the temple with very strict rules of which caste of people will live. What is very interesting is the palace is totally missing. The state is totally missing. It is only the temple in the center and people living all around the temple in a very strongly organized symbol, if I may use the word. And it's very intriguing why such a strong symbolism is needed. One can understand a strong symbolism when one makes a temple, but why impose that symbolism to the whole city? And that was some big question in our mind, and I was not willing to agree to this only argument of Vastu Purushmandi or this whole question of the sacred. And I think the answer lied somewhere else. So this is the kind of material that one was dealing with, kind of totally orthogonally organized, geometrically clarified city plans. And I was trying to, and I was reading up a lot of historical texts, especially Champaka Lakshmi, one of the retired professors from JNU, very important historians. So temple towns were occurring in certain kind of landscape condition. They were always occurring in flatlands. That is one of the correlations that we could begin to find. And there was always some kind of a water structures all around, either close to the river, tanks, canals. So there is something happening vis-a-vis landscape, which we all know about. Yeah, and that's something that so there is some relationship between the irrigation structures or water structures all around and the temple town. And as we went on reading historical text, what we begin to discover, this is the Google Earth plan of areas around Srirangam. And you see these water structures that are in the bottom of the screen. None of these water structures are, or most of these water structures are artificial structures. Very few structures are actually natural structures. They're actually all like bunds. Yeah. So, and this is a pre-17th century phenomena, because 17th century when European writers came, they find a lot of these water structures that were historically built. Water was not supposed to stop there, but water was dammed there. So they are like little check dams or little, earthen bunds that have been created. And so you have created a whole artificial landscape. And these are the kind of earthen bunds that we found during our field works. And if we start reading historical text and we get into more kind of archival data, what we begin to find is that all these water structures were actually commissioned by the temple. So here it's a very interesting phenomenon. Temple becomes an investor in financing irrigation schemes. And in the process, it leads to large surplus, and obviously they have a right over the surplus. So this is what the state actually should be doing. But in this case, the state was using temple as a conduit to control a larger landscape. That is number one, to modify the landscape in order to create a surplus. And hence the temple has to be a very strong symbolic diagram, because temple to my mind was not only a sacred diagram, but rather a political diagram. And temple or temple towns in this case were actually used to occupy more land and make land more productive and create more surplus. So what I'm trying to talk about here is this whole political economy angle. So imagine a little temple that comes up in a landscape that is not so productive and not so green. They start creating more water structures in a diameter or area of hundreds of kilometers. The temple town becomes big, and so does productivity, and so does productivity, and the whole landscape begins to modify. So this is also one of the earliest examples of of urbanism. This is also one of the earliest example of modification of landscape, and I think I found it pretty fascinating. So here my whole thesis is one of the ways to look at temple town cannot be only from the lens of religion, and it also has to be from other lenses. In this case, it has to be a lens of economy and geography. That's what we need. So these and some of those most interesting things will come out in the book that should be out. So it has everything is done. The manuscript has been edited. It has been reviewed, and now in a few months it should be out. And before I end this presentation, this is another initiative, a research initiative that me and some of my colleagues, Seema Khanwalkar, especially Seema Khanwalkar, she's a professor at SEPT, have started. And where what we are saying is, listen, our role as academics cannot be limited only to classroom, and knowledge has to be shared beyond the classroom. So this is a no-profit or not-for-profit kind of an initiative that we have, what we call as City Labs, and our aim is to create more awareness on Indian cities and make people more aware or look at Indian cities. And we do series of workshops. We did a workshop in Kathmandu, for example. Uh, Recently, in last year, we had a workshop in Goa. This is me speaking at the Charles Correa Foundation. This is again, we are in Kathmandu. Some of the Navratna students were also there, and I'm hoping now I will see many Navratna students, or this might be happening within Navratna University. And we run writing workshops. That's the thing that we do. And we come up with these wonderful publications. So Vaibhavi, one of my colleagues, has been putting these things together. In fact, she designed that logo that has been rolling on the screen. So this is one way we work with other architects, interested academics, to create new kind of material. But this is totally, our venture. We are not sponsored by anyone. This is something we are trying as an experiment of our own. If you're interested, you can go and look at these workshop publications. So this is, what I've been doing so far. And now I find myself at SEDA. And it's been a few months that I've joined at SEDA. And it has been some of the most interesting period of my life. For one, I joined SEDA. And first, I think very interesting people out here. Very youthful, very energetic, very cooperative and open. And that's the best part. So I'm really looking forward to working with them. But no, it has been a very strange times. I joined, and within a week of joining, there was a lockdown. So people don't even know that my students don't even know if I exist or not. And so this is me. I'm just trying to show a kind of a hello or a digital copy or a static that has now come to SEDA. And hopefully my students will soon see me in physical form very soon. I'm just waiting for them to come back so that I can meet them. I've been having these online sessions on Meet and Zoom and all that. So this is a new phase of my life. This is what I'm looking forward to. And in these few months, I think that's the best part. We used the lockdown very effectively. And I must thank my colleagues and especially Professor Nilay for encouraging us to innovate. I think he is one person who is always telling us to kind of think out of the box and do something new. And within the 4 months that I've been here, there have never been a dull moment. And I think my colleagues would agree who are in the Zoom room here, and so would the students. So we started off with this design challenge, the Navrachna design challenge, to come up with the idea of public places post-pandemic. When this started, this was even before the lockdown had started, and I think our students were already talking about what will happen to public places post-pandemic. It's only now, after 5 months, you are finding those proposals. But I was amazed at my students and others who responded to it. We have already started implementing physical distancing strategies, and we already have made the campus COVID ready. And I was very happy that me and my colleagues participated in it, and we have gone around, changing stuff in the campus. We have established a Center for Heritage Research. We just had our board meeting last week. Professor Julia Hegewald, who has written the foreword for my book, and Sandhya, myself, Professor Nilay, and Debashish Nayak, we are all part of the advisory board. And we have already initiated 3 very exciting projects. We are looking at the work of Laurie Baker in Baroda. We are looking at the railway heritage uh, of Baroda that my colleague Shalini is looking at. Laurie Baker's work, Pragya is looking at that. And Pranali, one of my colleagues, is putting together various publications of the various vernacular houses. And then we organized a very exciting lecture series known as Fresh Out of the Oven, which was pretty well received because we got these 4 characters who are practicing in a very, very different fashion. So I'm really looking forward to this time in this new role. I'm kind of really excited to be part of this whole group of new students and my colleagues, and I hope to continue this journey forward and take it forward and do even more exciting stuff. And I hope today, by my presentation, my students and even students in other university understand the life of a professor. They understand the life of a practicing architect and a researcher. And I hope you develop a better understanding of this profession. So that's what I can say. And in the end, I can say, well, if you come to SEDA at Navrachna University, that's the kind of life we lead, the kind of life that you have seen I've been leading. So thank you so much. Thanks for listening. And with that, I will stop sharing the screen. I hope I did not take, I think I was bang on time. And that's all I have to show Professor Yajnik, and that's all I have to show Shalini. I don't know whether Shalini's mic has started working. Not as yet, maybe. So thank you. Thanks a lot.
Shalini?
Shalini ma'am, your mic is unmuted.
Yeah, unable to hear you, Shalini.
Shalini ma'am, from the pendant, if your mic is mute, please put on from that side.
Okay, I think Professor Yajnik, I think there's some problem with Shalini's device. Since I know what she would be saying, I think she might be thanking me for the presentation. But Professor Yajnik, would you like to say a few things, and then what we're going to?
Would there be any questions? I thought we can
and then,
open for questions.
Yeah, we can have some questions, and people who have questions can just, students who are listening to this can WhatsApp their question to Pragya, who can read out the question, and people in the Zoom room can just switch on their mic and ask questions. I would love to have Professor Yajnik, and I would just love to hear what he has to say. I mean, you come from a very different field, and sometimes nice to see how you perceive us. Not that we are a different animal.
I have a question while others are maybe typing their questions.
Right.
My question is, what can a student look forward to, when you come to Navrachna University, School of Environment Design and Architecture? It's a very unique program. What exactly would can he look forward to?
That's a very good question, sir. And I think one of the things that I have noticed that makes SEDA, Navrachna University, as a unique proposition, I think one is that we have 3 undergraduate programs working together with immense high energy. So you have architecture, design, and landscape. And the kind of course sharing and interdisciplinary things that happen within the 3 programs, including the foundation program, I think is a unique thing. The second thing that I've noticed is we have some very, very state of the art workshop. And like you noticed in my presentation that if we do a design, we don't just make a drawing and send it. We like to make models. We like to get our hands dirty. We don't want to be, like those researchers in an ivory tower or an architect in an ivory tower. And that's what SEDA has. SEDA has had a huge culture by learning, by doing, making models. We have excellent state of the art workshop and very good people. So the whole faculty members are attuned to this way of kind of a tectonic working with their own hands. The other thing and the third thing which is very important is we simply don't want to create followers. And I think we are very clear about it. We want to create opinion leaders. We want people to be winning. We want our architectural students to be winning competition. Of course, they will be job ready. In fact, we want that they should be prized possession for any firm. But at the same time, we also want our students to be entrepreneurs that go out there, win competition, and change the profession also. We want them to be opinion leaders, changing the way the world thinks. So we want them to be change makers. That is number 3. And the number 4th is we want them to be good thinkers and critical thinkers, which means, see, Professor Yajnik, I believe the world is changing very fast. If we just teach our students to do few things very well, they go out, the world has changed, then they are helpless. So what we have to teach our student is how to teach themselves if they face a new problem. So we want to emphasize conceptual thinking. We don't want to give them an information overload. So wherever a new thing is thrown to them, they will come up with an innovative way of thinking, right? In this ways, they can survive in an unknown world that they will encounter. And I think through our studios, through our thesis, we really want to encourage this kind of independent thinking, fast-footedness, and a kind of being opinion leaders. We want our students to have an opinion, right? And of course, the skills have to be good. They have to be professionally competent. That is a non-negotiable. But we want to move far above the non-negotiable. And that's what we are doing already. So in a few words, this is what I had to say.
Very true. And we give that opportunity for
Correct.
students to think far ahead and be ambitious enough to be opinion leaders, to be thought leaders.
Correct. Like this, the SEDA Design Challenge example.
Right.
Our students were thinking about public places, what will happen to public places, much before people even thought that something can happen to it. And today, if you see, everyone is talking about post-pandemic, what will happen to our cities, what will happen to our public places, what will happen to retail architecture. But our students were already talking about it in the month of March.
Right.
And connecting internationally to other students who were also talking about it.
Right.
And this is what we want. And not only, in this emergency, but we want them to be always like this.
Right. I agree. And in fact, the kind of initiatives that we've taken will
Right.
give students both at the local level, Indian level, the ability to also learn from the past through our Heritage Research Center,
Correct.
but also look way far ahead into the future and have a lot of international experience with our collaborations, with our international collaborations that Navrachna University is offering now.
Like we are already working very closely with North Dakota State University. We might have something going with the University of Bonn very soon. We want our students to spend a few years here, spend a few years there, or oscillate between these 2 or 3 universities. That's what we want. And we always keep telling them, internationalization is very important. We want them to be abreast with what the students of their age are thinking and doing all across the world. So we don't want them to, think only about Gujarat or India, but they have to, the world has to be their playground. That's the way it has to be. Pragya, I see a lot of questions on YouTube and comments. I don't know how to take them, but
there's a question from on YouTube from Pallavi Abhale.
Pragya, you'll have to be louder, please.
Okay, there's a question from Pallavi Abhale, and she's asking, considering pandemic and social distancing as a tool, how can we proceed for urban design?
How can we proceed to?
For urban design.
Well, that's exactly what I was discussing with Professor Nile, and for that, I did give a few presentations. Uh, what the pandemic has done, Pallavi, is that it has, in some sense, has the potential to question the very notion of public place and the very notion of cities. Cities are all about getting together. Cities are all about crowding. Cities are being about being an anonymous stranger in a high density environment, and cities are about sharing. If you remove the part of sharing, if you remove the part about crowding, you don't have a city. You just have individual communities that are living private lives. So I think as urban design, what you will have to really resist is that you will have to very quickly redefine the notion of city centers or the idea of the city itself. Already we find almost like like the garden city movement in the turn of the century. There was this romance for the countryside. This is a in industrial during industrialization, because the cities in UK were so bad, people wanted to go out in the countryside and make their houses, which I think was a huge disservice to the idea of the city. What can happen, and as urban designers we need to be alert, is we can get into this kind of an idea of everyone wants to move into suburbs and live close to nature, almost like the bad American suburban housing. So we will have to come up with solutions which can get densities. We should not leave the idea of densities. Otherwise, we will all withdraw into private domains. That is what the pandemic can do. And I think, as if you are an urban designer, I would begin by questioning the idea of nature and the idea of suburbs versus the idea of the city. Already we find real estate moving towards the suburbs. People are looking for houses that are like the British wanted to make a bungalow surrounded by a garden, because in their head they had a notion that Indians are not very healthy and they wanted to protect themselves from malaria and other diseases. We don't want that privatization to happen to Indian cities. So I think this is what I feel where urban design can play a huge role.
There is another question by student Pooja Todi. In what ways can an inspiration from the temple city can help in today's urban planning?
Okay, now this is a very good question. And this is where I become a bit critical of history. One of my job as an academic is not simply to celebrate or romanticize history. One of my job is also to be critical of history, because if we are not critical of history, we can end up repeating the same mistakes. As an architect, I find the temples to be very beautiful architecturally, very beautiful in terms of its architecture. But as an urbanist and as somebody who understands cities, I find the temple town to be extremely oppressive, because they tell you where to live, they tell you what to do, as it is a very strong grid. It is a very strong grid that lays out and that creates a city almost like a symbol, that treats the city almost like a symbol, and does not, or I would say is not very sympathetic to the people because of the larger message that the city has to give. Uh, to my mind, what needs to be learned is that this should not be done in today's world. We are not living in an autocratic environment where there is one center of power. In this case, it was the temple, which was actually a proxy for the state. It's a very sophisticated arrangement here. Temple is actually the proxy for the state. And historically speaking, organized religion has been used to legitimize coercive authority. Historically speaking, that has always been the case. You look at Mesopotamia, you look at Egypt. So in some sense, from the temple town, what we also need to learn is to make a case for more democratic cities, for more open cities where people can decide, rather than, and which is very apt today, rather than looking cities are only from its symbolic value. That's my answer to Ms. Todi, who incidentally has also been the winner in our design competition. I think it is the same Todi, right?
Sir, good evening.
Yes. Yes, Fakhruddin, please.
In context of the previous question, I have a question that how we can use history as a tool to design future buildings.
Correct.
As it is very rare, as it is very rare that one get chance to design temple or mosque again. It is very rare. How can we use that it not become a mimic?
No, I think this is a question that we are often asked, and so we don't have to use history literally. We have to learn from history. We have to be inspired from history, and we have to be influenced by it. We can reinterpret it. But when you say you want to use it, personally, I find it problematic. And I think this is what when we started the Center for Heritage, this is what we said. This is not about romance about history or celebrating history, but respecting it, understanding it, so it begins to influence us. So for example, one of the things we learn from history is frugality. Gandhiji learned a lot from history. And what he says is, when you look at the past, people could survive in so little resources. We learn from history about sustainability. We learn from history about cooperation and respecting others. But we also find in histories, a part of history which we might be very uncomfortable with. And we have to call that out, right? So I think you don't have to literally use it. You have to get inspired from it. For example, post-pandemic, so many people are talking about history and heritage right now, and how in earlier times we could do with so less. We could manage without traveling. We are talking about work home right now. I know of schemes where they are trying to make houses with a little office, and it makes so much sense to make a house with a little office. Now, this is exactly what was happening in the earlier times when you had a workplace with your house, and in that workplace, the best thing was the women folk could also work. Now, because of industrialization, what happened is women could not travel to work because she also had to take care of other things, looking at the gender biases that existed. Correct? So I think these things can help us question a lot of things. That's what I believe. But we should not get very anxious to use history directly. Let it influence us. Let it be an indirect influence. That's what I believe.
Thank you, sir.
Pragya, are there any more questions?
The last question.
Yes.
Student has asked, how do you manage to do so many things?
Well, you've not seen a few more things. On the left-hand side, there is this big table with a lot of aeroplanes. Practically every other evening when I come back, I spend a few minutes, few hours, sometimes making little balsa planes. I don't know. I think I like doing it. Firstly, it is not a job. I don't see it as a job. I see it as an exciting journey, a fun journey. Working in a university, teaching is as exciting as going for a hike or playing football with my son. I think the moment you can make your work as if it is loads of fun, loads of humor, loads of laughter, and when you have a colleague like Shalini, there's always a lot of laughter. That is one thing is always guaranteed. It doesn't feel like work. That's what I feel, and I think maybe staying with young people, students, is always very exciting to me. I mean, even my office, Professor Nilay, is like a little university. Whenever I give a lecture somewhere, I go back to my office and I give a lecture again. So I think, and I kind of like it that way.
Okay, I think, can we take one last question?
Okay, yes.
How will you encourage the young designers regarding going sustainable? Because it's a high time now to give environment more priority and start designing according to our needs rather than our wants.
Well, this is a philosophical question, and I think the fact that you are asking this question, I'm sure you will already find an answer. So one thing is, this whole environmental debate, if we see, it has become more urgent, especially when we have realized that we have reached a tipping point and we are almost at the point of no return. This whole climate crisis, and if you ask Mr. Trump, he says, well, there is no climate crisis. But if you ask scientists and rational people, they will say that we have reached a tipping point where we have reached almost a point of no return. And when you think that as humankinds, we have modified our environment to an extent where we have permanently damaged it. I think it is a very, very, very scary thought. That is one. The second thing I think we need to question, and since you're asking me how will I influence a young mind, the whole high modernist and the post-enlightenment thinking, especially coming from the Western world, and this modernity spreads all across the globe, they have had this linear idea of progress. A linear idea of progress means that we as humans will continue to use the earth's resources, and we will continue to prosper, and we will continue to prosper, and we will continue to prosper. What the pandemic has done, and tomorrow maybe seawater rising in Bombay, and don't be surprised, you might find half of Bombay submerged for a few months, will do exactly what COVID-19 did. It will really make us think that what kind of a world that have we created. So I think to my mind, this debate of climate change is a good debate for everyone to understand. If one wants to talk about the question of environment and sustainability, that's what I feel. Also, having said that, a lot of scholars have been, and this is, sorry, I want to press on this point. We tend to think, a lot of environmental friends of mine, we think that they sometimes have a very naive notion of environment. And we must understand human existence was only possible, and I also showed that in temple towns of South India, was only possible by modification of nature. Agriculture itself is a modification of nature. So rather than talk about something being nature and something being artificial, today the term that a lot of people are using, and you might like to read a very interesting author by the name of Matthew Gandy. Matthew Gandy has written a book on New York, and he uses the word second nature or new nature. So the question is not that whether we should touch nature or not. We have already touched nature. Our civilizational values were not possible without touching nature, without modifying nature. But we have to say to ourselves that what kind of new nature we want to create, or what is the second nature we want to create. If we say that, I think the debate can be more sophisticated. Otherwise, the debate tends to be whether we should touch nature or not touch nature, and then that's a futile debate, to my mind. Sorry for a long answer to a rather short and an innocent question.
I think we are all very honored today to have our chairperson, Mrs. Tejal Amin, attending. Ma'am, would you like to say a few words? You'll have to unmute.
Yes, I have unmute, and I managed to join a little late because I was delayed elsewhere. But right. This has been a very insightful and a very thought-provoking discussion. The last few, question answers that I managed to hear. Professor Pratyush comes with a lot of experience, a lot of deep thought and research on various aspects. And he has a very holistic view which has come through today, linking the past with the present in order to go forward with new models and new thoughts and new strategies. Sustainability, environment, all these are issues which are very relevant today and which have to become a very important part of design thinking for architecture, and I'm sure, and for all other related fields or even unrelated fields, because there has to be a design in everything. And I'm sure Professor Pratyush will add a lot of, bring in fresh ideas and add a lot of vigor to SEDA, which has already, done very, very good work. We have very enriched and we have a very good program which will further get enriched with Professor Pratyush's, direction and guidance and engagement. I'm very happy to have been able to join, and all those who are here attending this seminar, this webinar will also have many takeaways. And especially for our students and for our faculty, I think there are very, very exciting semesters coming up, and a very exciting period with Professor Pratyush heading SEDA. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Tejal Ben. This was very encouraging words. And I absolutely hope to live up to the expectation. Very excited about the things that can happen here, and wonderful support that I'm finding here. So thanks for everything.
All the best.
Thank
and
you.
all the best to NUV and SEDA, all our students, all our faculty. And we've already seen wonderful work happening through, many collaborations. I have to particularly mention that Pratyush, you were one of the early people
Right.
who designed a competition for COVID
Yes.
in, with social distancing and designing spaces with social distancing, which, and I've seen some of those, drawings and presentations, and I'm very, very thankful to you for, stimulating the young minds and also the minds of our faculty to be proactive, think and move forward, and also the international connections you bring, and that, global sensibility and
Correct.
holistic approach that you bring will be of immense benefit to our students and to our faculty and to Navratna University.
Thank you,
Thank
madam.
you, Professor Nilay Bhai, for giving me an opportunity to share some thoughts.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.
So I think we have now come to the end so I am now thanking myself for the lecture. So since Shalini's mic is not working, she was supposed to do that. But I think it's been wonderful. Thanks everyone for joining. And I'm sure that there are a lot of questions all of you have. We are always available. You can write to us, and even in the classes you can discuss. But we are really looking forward to meeting you in person, and pretty excited about the activities that me and my colleagues would be undertaking. So whereas there'll be a lot of work that we'll be doing in the Heritage Research Center, but also we'll be soon starting an international Navratna University International Lecture Series. And some of the lecturers, professors, especially Julia Agarwal, Professor Mahalingam from North Dakota State University have already agreed. In fact, I just received a mail from them asking about the dates. So you will meet us very soon as part of a new lecture series.
Pratyush, I'm interrupting, but I hope you have shared the layout, the design layout for the NUV campus, keeping in mind social distancing, which you did early on.
Yes,
have you been able to share it today?
No, today we did show a glimpse of that work. Okay. We just showed a glimpse that we have done such a thing, but we did not get into the details of it.
No, but I wish to share with all our participants or audience today that Professor Pratyush and his colleagues at SEDA immediately went about the task of making our university, Navratna University campus COVID friendly, let me put it that way. Right. And we have very clearly demarcated movement, physical movement points and pathways. We have all our social distancing for staff is in place, for visitors is in place. And most importantly, Pratyush has designed a very nice, mobile, standalone hand washing areas.
Foot operated.
Station, let me call it hand washing stations, which we will, whenever we are ready to open, we will put up at various places so that, hand washing becomes a very, very regular and frequent, not activity, but a job that most of us will do. Students and faculty included. So I like the quick response that you have towards the changing environment, the external factors, and I think that is what training is all about. Whether it is design or it is any discipline, our students have to be trained to think on their feet and to respond with suitable and reasonable solutions. Thank you.
Absolutely. In fact, I think I was thinking of having a separate presentation where we would explain all the initiatives that we have taken at Navrachna University for social distancing. And I would like to invite my colleagues also to make that presentation, because many of them, like Shalini and Pragya and all of them, were involved. Sure.
Okay, then is Shalini, could she manage to unmute or?
No, I think you will
Okay, then let me do the honors. Okay, so I thank Professor Pratyush today for an absolutely wonderful session. And as you can see, the approach which Professor Pratyush has in building this school is very much in sync with our overall philosophy, which is interdisciplinary and innovation and solving the problems of society. So thank you so much, Professor Pratyush. Thank you, Professor, all the colleagues here who have joined us today from the School of Environment Design and Architecture. Thank you, Mrs. Amin. My special thanks to all the students who have attended today, all the students who are looking forward to joining our university. You are most welcome here. Do come and have a look whenever things open up. And I'm also very grateful and thankful to all the professionals, because I see a large number of professionals have attended today's session as well. This entire session is available also on YouTube for you and your friends to view subsequently. Thank you so much and have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you.